Alrighty, folks, let's bring her home. Welcome to the finale of the Halloween in July celebration so huge it has taken over August, and I might have to reconsider the name of this whole thing next year. This year I chose to explore some of the most popular entries in the mascot horror niche with a beginner's mindset to better understand them without the blinders of preconception, and it's been a ride. Last stop is the one franchise that started it all, Five Nights at Freddy's. Like seriously, I've been in the security room the whole time. Did you think we were just gonna skip the original games? As you know, Halloween in July, where July is now all of August and whatever other month I feel like it should be, is that special time where I play me some spooky games, and we have a spooky good deal on the Patreon. I slashed the yearly discount as low as it will let me set it, and to sweeten the pot, anyone who takes advantage of that yearly discount gets one of these anti-content iron-on patches that I make by myself as a free thank you gift. And even better is if you go in at the $5 tier or higher at the yearly rate, you get your own patron apron just like mine as an even bigger free thank you gift to help you not get your clothes messy while you're attempting the cooking segments I do. I'm gonna keep this going for the end of calendar August since we're pretty much there anyway, so everyone gets a chance to try it out and get a fair shot at that deal. And now, let's do a primer on what's basically one of the most popular franchises in modern horror and arguably one of the most successful indie games ever, Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's, or just FNAF for short, which comes from longtime indie dev Scott Cawthon, who, after getting some pretty harsh reviews on his previous game, one particularly scathing critique of Scott's current game, which was Chipper and Sons Lumber Co., was by critic Stephanie Sterling, who, after reviewing the Steam Greenlight, that's what it was called. Once upon a time, there was this thing called Greenlight where you had to do this weird little song and dance to get your game on Steam, and it was a whole thing, but we're getting sidetracked here. Regardless, she said that the woodland creatures in Chipper and Sons Lumber Co. looked like they were creepy animatronics, like they were robots that were gonna kill your children. But rather than go the digital homicide route, Scott decided to take it in stride, and well, the rest is literal history. FNAF took not only the indie space by storm, but also became the king of YouTube for quite some time. Like, you love it or hate it, people were making videos about it, and in hindsight, I was active back then. I really should have tried to get in on that. Oh well, we're here now. Before we talk about the first game in earnest, let's get a little bit of historical context for Five Nights at Freddy's so that maybe the folks that at least say they have no idea how a game like FNAF got so popular might have a better understanding of how horror games got to this point. Once upon a time, in a bygone era known as the 1980s, all it took to make a game spooky was to replace the little mushroom people and turtles with skeletons and ghosts. Then in 1992, some French dudes made a game called Alone in the Dark that was a designated spooky video game for the DOS era of computers. Depending on your leanings, either this or the Japanese exclusive Super Nintendo game Clock Tower in 1995 were the start of what we know as survival horror. I did some cool videos on the Alone in the Dark franchise, and Tangamushi did a wonderful exploration of the Clock Tower series if you're interested in either of those series. Moving swiftly forward though, then Resident Evil happened in 1996, and yeah, everyone was like, wow, that's cool, let's be exactly like them. And things were just kind of exactly like the Resident Evil games for a while. From the late 90s to the early turn of the century, horror games became well established, and they were mostly clunky, initially by design, but then in accordance to Resident Evil style, which included that awkward control scheme for making fights more tense, a lot of puzzle solving, very cautious play, and careful use of resources, with combat being a distant secondary thing. Resident Evil continued to grow as horror games following along until something a little wild happened. They kept all the spooky stuff, but then made it more of an action game with Resident Evil 4, which took the world by storm again. This was well and good, with a lot of games following suit as action horror was hot. But meanwhile, a little studio in Sweden called Frictional Games had discovered something. While they were making their trilogy of games based on a tech demo for their engine, Penumbra, using weapons in the first game was clunky, which was to be expected, but took away from the horror aspect because if you were good enough to figure out the weapon mechanics, you could just kill all the baddies and stroll through the game game. Taking weapons out in the second game, Penumbra: Black Plague, and forcing the player to hide and be creative made for a much better time. We're just gonna pretend the third game of the trilogy never happened, because after that, Frictional decided to just make their next game about being an utterly defenseless protagonist against the horrors from the ground up. Behold, Amnesia: The Dark Descent, a game that revolutionized horror games and launched dozens of YouTube careers. Amnesia was a game where the protagonist had to run, hide, and solve puzzles as quietly as possible because the player character couldn't even so much as look at the monsters. They can't even be in the dark by themselves, which translated into massive success and a crapload of games trying to emulate this to varying degrees of their own success, with stuff like the freeware version of Slender and all of its clones taking the spooky gaming world by storm. There was a lot of just running around while a bad thing chased you in the free version of the Unity engine in the early 2010s. So around the early 2010s, AAA horror was doing, whatever was happening with Resident Evil 6, and the— Yes, can I help you? Frisk wants to be in the voiceover too, just bear with me. Where were we here? Cram. And the indie horror scene was crammed full of running away simulators that seemed more interested in trying to court YouTubers than they were being fun games. And then, out of nowhere, a struggling indie dev puts out a little, and I mean little, this thing is less than 1/3 of a gigabyte installed onto your hard drive, game that was basically the antithesis of everything in indie and AAA horror. And with that, we've covered 20 years of horror video games. I think you know how the next 10 go based on the title of this video. So one of the setbacks of playing something that's not only 10 years old, but also so widely loved and played by so many people, is that it's hard to not know the inner workings of FNAF. I think even before people started just straight up decompiling it, the aggression system and how sometimes lower levels of aggression can actually make things harder if an animatronic gets to your doors was all figured out pretty fast. In spite of all this, FNAF the first put me through the ringer. The furthest I was able to get was late into 5 AM on night 3, because juggling cameras and checking doors can be tricky. I've said it before and I'll say it again. YouTubers are not very good at video games. That's why we talk about games and not make them or play them professionally. At least in my case, like games outside of like my niche. I have to add artificial challenges to things like Fallout and BioShock just to make me feel something in those games, but FNAF is out of my wheelhouse. I think I could have gotten farther, but I noticed later on I was starting to do the speedrunning trick where you effectively stun lock the animatronics by like spamming cameras and lights, and that kind of defeats the spirit of the game and the challenge, so I drew a line and called it quits there. And yes, Five Nights at Freddy's is indeed pretty damn scary. It's one of the few games I've played that made me physically sweat. Another one would be Kerbal Space Program, and that's relevant because it's not so much the jump scares as the constant tension while you're managing the camera and the power. Will you have enough to make it to 5 AM without leaving yourself open? What if Bonnie decides to be a jackass again and hang out in front of the door for 2 hours straight? Am I checking Foxy too much? I don't think I can afford another Foxy bum rush tonight with how Bonnie's been acting. And then there's the sound design, which is just so dang good. The ambient music, the sound of the animatronics shuffling around, hearing Chica make a mess in the kitchen even though you don't have a camera feed there. Even without musical stings, FNAF has some of the most amazing sound design for such a small game, which when combined with the tense resource management of both your focus and your power, makes me soak through my shirt in an hour and change. Oh yeah, and the jump scares. Those are a thing. While later mascot horror games trying to emulate FNAF's success will blatantly abuse them, they are 100% earned in Five Nights at Freddy's. The jump scare isn't some out of nowhere thing where we need a good reaction for YouTubers or whoever, but instead a sign that you messed up and failed to keep an eye on your cameras, or you didn't get to the door fast enough when Foxy started running. You know that they're there, and even when they're most likely coming, especially when the night gets a little hectic. And in the end, you have no one to blame but yourself when they happen. And one last thing about Five Nights at Freddy's that I didn't really know where to put for this section, but the UI in this game is just so buttery smooth. Like one of the best I've played in such a small game. I mean, it even punches above its weight with like AAA games. It's hard to tell by just looking at the screen just how seamless and how good it feels to play around with the cameras and the doors during the night shift, but believe me, it's great. I love it. And then a whopping 3 whole months later, we got Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Scott Cawthon works fast. Right off the bat, this game looks nicer than the first one. There's more lit environments where you can see things a little better, and we see the animatronics in a lot more poses aside from just standing there menacingly. Another nice touch is that the game runs at your native resolution, so no more fiddling around with the Alt-Enter command to try and get a borderless full screen mode. I, for one, who's recording that, certainly appreciated it. There's also some new stuff, like how there aren't any doors to insulate yourself from the animatronics with, and now you must alternate between disguising yourself as one of them and stunning them with your flashlight to ward the others off, which, you can't use the flashlight while wearing the mask. Shame about that. There's also this music box that you need to keep winding at all times, which brings us to the next major thing about this game. This game is tough. I will 100% admit to getting utterly filtered by Five Nights at Freddy's 2, where at one point I straight up said out loud in my room while playing it, "This is night 1?" I was able to make it well into night 2, but I will happily admit that FNAF 2 is for experienced night watchmen only. The first and most obvious way this is apparent is the sheer number of animatronics that you're going to need to keep track of and fend off. In the last game, you had the main 4 as your primary antagonists. That's Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy. In FNAF 2, you have those 4, plus the toy trio, plus Mangle, plus the marionette, plus goddamned Balloon Boy for 10 primary antagonists. There's others too that are a more rare case encounter, which I did not even stand a chance of getting far enough to come across. Maybe if like the first couple nights it was just the toys and Mangle, and then like maybe the others later on, and then on night 3, Phone Guy was like, oh yeah, we just got a shipment from the old location. The old animatronics are gonna be in the back room, but you should keep an eye on them in case somebody forgot to remove their power sources. It might have been more manageable, but as it is, you just get bum rushed by a Disney theme park's worth of animatronics every night. And that leads us to the other major source of the incline on this difficulty curve that is FNAF 2. You need to be constantly juggling actions to stay alive. You gotta wind the box, check the vents, put on your mask, take the mask off to spam the flashlight, wind the box, check the cams. Where is Mangle? Check the cams. Stun Balloon Boy, wind up the box. Goro Majima jumps out of the vents to test your fighting abilities while you check the cams. Oh no, you're getting double teamed by Foxy, who needs the flashlight, and Mangle, who needs the mask. You cannot do both of these at the same time. Check the cams, and you're redoing this night. If I had to guess, this might have been an overcorrection for the first game, where those who had the game down to muscle memory or were just schmoes who got really good RNG could conserve enough power to just shut the doors at 5 a.m. and coast through the rest of a night. No doors means no coasting, but just for good measure, let's more than double the monsters and add 2 more tasks you need to keep track of so you don't die. And unfortunately, this leads to less of a scary feeling and more just a constant frantic sensation. Like, sure, there's some panic in there, but I'm not unnerved like the last one. I'm just running around like a madman checking for cameras. It's a shame that I suck so much, because between the nights, there seems to be a lot of expanding on whatever was going on in the last game, and it's really interesting. You know, that would be a cool thing to do if someone who did play the games organized all these stories things and put them into informative videos or something so we could all understand what's going on. Has anyone done something like that yet? That'd probably be a great basis for a YouTube channel. Time for that cooking segment. I think it's fitting, since we're playing games where you play the night shift, that we do some breakfast before we draw in the blackout curtains and try to get some sleep. We're not getting too wild here. We're just gonna make a breakfast sandwich for 2 or 1 very hungry lad and some hash browns to go with it. This is another one of those one pan things, so long as you cook smart. Let's get our prep done and then we'll get right into business. Step 1, beat and slightly salt some eggs. We're not gonna be cooking them for a while, but we want the salt to do salt things to help with the flavor, and that takes a bit of time. Then take a brick of cheddar and grate yourself maybe half to a whole cup's worth and set that aside in a small bowl or other container. Just normalize having a big old brick of cheese in your fridge. It takes no time to shred it, which you can even do in advance if you wanna, and you save money over buying the pre-sliced or pre-grated stuff. Now slice your bread if you need to, and if not, just set your pre-sliced stuff aside and at the ready, layering your cheese that you just grated on top of the slices. Now take the time to peel and then grate your potato. It's not all that hard, and if anything, after you do it for a while, peeling takes hardly a minute. Then run it over your cheese grater like it was a brick of cheddar we just went through earlier, and you can just leave it there till it's ready. Finally, it's time to actually cook some stuff. Get your pan hot and lay in your bacon. Cook it to your level of doneness that you prefer, and then set it directly on top of one of the slices of bread to get that cheese melting just a little. Don't remove remove the bacon grease. We're gonna cook the eggs in it. By now, the eggs should be a darker shade of yellow from the salting. Pour them in and they will cook fast. Try to push them into a scramble that's about the size of your slice of bread, and then when they don't run as much but are still a little bit runny, use your spatula and maybe some tongs to peel them out of the pan and put them on the other slice of bread, and maybe give that a sec to let the cheese get melted on that side too. Something that'll make this sandwich a little more manageable to bite into is to lightly chop the scrambled eggs once they're done to help them lie flat. Okie dokie, it's time to make the sandwich extra toasty. Re-oil your pan and maybe turn the heat down just a bit, and then carefully combine the sandwich halves, laying the sandwich egg side down onto the pan. Everything involved with this sandwich is already cooked, so we're just going for a nice toasting here and to maybe melt the cheese a little more. Check on it after a couple minutes to see if the bread has gotten a nice color on it before flipping it to another area of the pan that still has oil on it, because the bread will absorb oil as it cooks and we don't want to accidentally cook one side of sandwich on just raw iron. It'll just get all burnt and that side will suck. More on that later. Once the other side is done, pull it out and put it somewhere to keep warm. Let's finish with these hash browns. Put a small pat of butter on the pan and let it melt before adding your hash browns in. Then use your spatula to flatten them out until they're a nice thin layer covering most of the pan. Once they're situated, we're gonna lightly season them, and we're only seasoning this one side because these will be thin enough to where seasoning both sides would overdo it. Now, have you ever tried making hash browns and noticed that, well, one side turned out great, the other side is all pale and burnt at the same time? Well, that goes back to what we did earlier with the sandwich. Potatoes are starches, and starches tend to absorb things like oil. How do we fix this? Simple. Once we start seeing the edges of our hash brown turn, well, brown, take several thin slices of butter and place them on top of your uncooked side of the hash brown that's facing you. Once the butter's melted, carefully flip them over and voila! You now have even browning on your hash browns. Once they're done, pull them out of the pan and divide them into two halves onto two plates, or if you are extremely hungry, one enormous plate, and then do the same for your sandwich and serve. This is a great weekend breakfast for you and someone else for those lazy Saturday mornings. Since it works in twos, it's also easy to double for the whole family. If you want the nitty-gritty details like the exact recipe, that's over on my Patreon while we're still running that special. Now let's get back to the night shift. Welcome to Five Nights at Freddy's 3. I think this one might be my favorite. Like, it's a close call between the OG and this one, and both are enjoyable for different reasons. 3 is the benefit of being able to have Captain's experiences from the last 2 games applied to them. To give you the short on it, the pizzeria is now a haunted attraction, capitalizing on all the sketchy stuff that happens surrounding the Freddy's franchise. You play as the guy hired to play the role of security guard at the attraction, and you're running through a week of preparation for the big opening. Last time, there were a ton of animatronics stalking you in FNAF 2. This time around, there is only one, but he means business. Springtrap over here wanders the halls of the Spookieplex and seems to want to get into your booth and make some trouble. Lucky for you, he's a little lost right now and easily distracted by the child noises you can create using this camera system. Springtrap might be the only animatronic hunting you, but he's not the only entity in the Spookieplex that's haunting you. Oh god, that was some Peggy Hill-ass shit. I am so sorry. That was just terrible. Where were we? Oh yeah, there are now phantoms of previous animatronics haunting the facility. Or perhaps it's a gas leak. The guy on the phone said something about ventilation. This is awesome. It was kind of a bummer in the past that if you got one encounter from the monsters in the previous games, it was all over. You have to do a whole new playthrough to get to the next night. And that would also mean a lot of playthroughs if you wanted to see everything. Here, however, the other scares are just setbacks, which, while might lead to a game over, still let you keep playing after they get you. They just pop up, cause some visual halo that disables parts of your system, and make you lose track of Springtrap. Oh yeah, I've been saying visual halo a lot during this series, and any mascot horror fans who have wandered into the channel might be confused, so vets, take a drink break while I break it down for them. In a game very near and dear to my heart for its jagtastic way to cause psychic damage to all who play it, there's a special debuff. The game in question is called Divine Cybermancy, and it is exactly as weird as this image implies. I don't have the time to explain the rest of so just watch either my own or Mandalore Gaming's old videos on it, and in the meantime, just know that visual halo is a debuff you get in for having too much bad karma, aka killing too many friendly NPCs. That's just like the start of the weird for I. It's wild. Back to the Spookyplex though. There's still some juggling because otherwise it'd be a cakewalk to keep track of and distract Springtrap, even with the cameras having a delay and looking all scuffed. You don't need to obsessively wind a music box, but you do need to regularly reboot systems as they go down unless you give up your cameras, your ability to distract Springtrap with audio, or the ability to tell what is real. You can't get anything else done while a system is rebooting, and oh boy can Springtrap move in those few seconds it takes. There's some great tension when you're frantically checking cameras, trying to see where he got off to, and oh no, you were scanning for too long and Visual Halu Foxy doesn't like that. Oh yeah, and if you couldn't find Springtrap, that's because he's already in your office. Now it's time for a quick look at Five Nights at Freddy's 4, and I'll be honest with you all, I spent a minimal amount of time with this one, which wasn't my initial intention for the game, but I ran into a deal breaker real fast. It's a shame too, since Five Nights at Freddy's 4 has some pretty cool animatronic designs and a cool concept for the bonus game. So before we get into the big deal breaker, there was another issue I had, which was that the controls were a little strenuous. Having to run all the way over to each door, fumbling through the commands to check and then shut the door, running back and then doing it again, got a little hard on my wrists. I am rapidly approaching my decrepit old man arc, and my wrists can only do so much. And additionally, it feels like a lot of steps to do a little bit of stuff, and I often found myself misclicking or accidentally running away from a door I meant to shut. Lucky for me though, it wasn't just a super big strain. It was just like, oh yeah, probably if I did this for like an hour straight, my wrists would be killing me. Now, my deal breaker came pretty early in the game. Well, unfortunately, I did not capture it myself because I had my screen capture set up in a different way that FNAF 4 did not like. The game starts with a graphic asking you to please, pretty please with a cherry on top, turn your volume way up because you need to carefully listen for audio cues. That's weird. I didn't have to do that for the previous games, and I was able to hear all the sound cues just fine. I turned it up a little bit to oblige the game and got started. The first night goes okay, but I can't hear shit. I'm lucky enough though that the animatronics are not super aggressive, and I keep catching them at the beginning of the hallway where it's not going to be an issue. I turn up some more later on because I'm having trouble hearing the sounds of Plushtrap running in the bonus game. Then I get to my second night, misremember what I'm supposed to do when the nightmares are right at my door, and Jesus Christ, that was loud! I wasn't even scared. It was just extremely unpleasant. I have a -10 decibel pad on my recorded audio so that it doesn't peak too much while I'm playing, and if it's too quiet, I can just amplify it later. But even with the padding, the jump scare completely clipped my audio. In case you don't know what clipping is, it's when someone makes a noise into a microphone that is just so loud that the microphone cannot properly capture it. Think of the microphone as a bucket of water, and then there's some dumbass trying to fill it with a fire hose. You're going to lose most of the water in the process. And then, after the game asked me to crank my volume and then blasted my ears, I decided that FNAF 4 was not for me. And thank goodness I decided to spring for Sister Location instead of just doing the original 4, because otherwise that would have been a real sour note to close out on. Sister Location has the distinction of being the longest worked on game in all the original 5, with Cawthon taking a whopping year and change between 4 and Sister Location, and it shows. Sister Location starts out almost entirely different from the first 4, with less camera work and more intense as hell minigames. Heck, you can't even access traditional FNAF gameplay until you not only beat the game, but find a certain keycard that I had some very bad luck when it came to obtaining. Overall, the game's more a thriller ride than the traditional spookies of the first, third, and fourth games, with me still holding that 2 was more of a frantic, anxiety-inducing experience than overtly spooky. The stuff you do is mostly puzzle-like stuff, with some things being harder than others. There's a much better version of red light, green light than there was in Security Breach, which puzzles me even more as to how they messed that up so badly. There is also extreme parts and service. There is also a noticeable difficulty spike in Night 4, which, thanks to a combination of a lot of juggling and some RNG, means that you might spend a long time, maybe upwards of an hour, trying to wait out this one challenge. I swear there were times where I was within 10 seconds of passing and then I get got. Such is life though. One last thing I enjoyed about Sister Location is that we get some levity in this one. It's got a good sense of humor, but it isn't heavy-handed. Nothing that had me laughing out loud, but it's still appreciated as we've seen some of these games in this experiment take themselves much too seriously. I love the adventures of the philandering vampire as I too have worked the late shift and then proceeded to watch some of the dumbest stuff on the airwaves just to let the engine cool down a bit before going to bed. On the note of a more traditional FNAF gameplay, it is definitely there. I just suck. I guess it's also a run of bad luck like I was mentioning earlier, because during my entire playthrough, I got the death mini game once. And understandably, I didn't know what to do the first time around. I know it's there because Custom Night is right there on the main menu and I just haven't unlocked it. It didn't feel right to just go into the game files and cheat, and as far as I'm concerned, at this point, having the full Custom Night, which all the other games have with the new characters and new setting for the late shift, is just icing on the cake after what I experienced with what is the base game. I'd say that Sister Location is my third favorite, with a photo finish needed to determine who's number one between the OG and FNAF 3, but it's a close grouping between the whole trio. My final thoughts on the original 5 are, man, there's a reason why these games started as a sensation. Sure, the first game was lightning in a bottle, but thanks to Scott Cawthon's ability to work fast and keep consistent quality between games, what was going to be just a sensation game became a sensation franchise. I'm still unsure if I like the first one or 3 better, but the majority of the original games are winners, and maybe even 4 out of 5 if I could just get good. I still can't forgive the 4 for blasting my ears like that though. Personally, I think that out of all of Cawthon's greatest achievements, that UI in the first game should be put in game dev textbooks for just how smooth it is and how seamless it is to use. A+ job. Now, out of all of these games I've covered for this summer, Five Nights at Freddy's is the one that genuinely has a legacy. FNAF arguably invented mascot horror, and I find it a bit ironic that rather than focus on the simple but unorthodox gameplay to create an experience that sets the games apart from mainstream horror, everyone else who's not overtly a fan game of FNAF goes hard into those marketable mascots. But then again, it is called mascot horror. Or perhaps mascot horror is a better emphasis. Mascots in video games are as old as video games themselves, through like hell, Pac-Man and Mario. Heck, horror itself is a fairly mascot-centric genre. We got Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, Creature from Black Lagoon, Freddy, Jason, the Xenomorph, and just so many more. Having a mascot in a horror game just kind of makes sense. That being said, in my mind, the gameplay of the original games got FNAF attention, and the mascots and mystique around the games gave it legs. By the way, I just made a whole video about the entirety of the original Five Nights at Freddy games without ever getting into lore theories or even so much as saying the word Afton once in this video. No, really, I control F'd this entire script, and the previous sentence is the only time I have ever said that name. I just kind of wanted to see if I could do it. Beyond that, Five Nights at Freddy's has gone well beyond an indie dev taking some flippant criticism in an extremely constructive manner. It's now a regular series with other studios taking over for Scott so they can try and do things beyond just what a single person can do. There was a movie that I'll probably watch one of these days, and now half the shirts at Hot Topic are related to some iteration of FNAF, with the middling quality band shirts regulated to the back wall. Very few people have gone as big as FNAF has, and I don't see it slowing down now that Steel Wool's starting to iron out most of the kinks and how they want to do their version of Freddy and the gang. One last thing that I actually just forgot to put in my script, but obviously there is a reason I'm doing this video today. It is the 10-year anniversary, and a lot of people have their thoughts on what's going to be revealed, and this is my idea. This is what I would personally like to see. Is I know there's like a million like Funkos and U2s or whatever of FNAF, like various characters, even like action figures like you see at the GameStop that I'm not sure who buys, but they're there. And at this point, since Five Nights at Freddy's has been around for a decade, there are most likely people in the fandom old enough to have some spare change. And you know what I think would be really cool? Forget the Funkos, get into the SH figure art stuff. Like, an SH figure art Springtrap would possibly be something I could buy. And like, they're really good with interchangeable parts to show like interchangeable like states of characters. Like, I have had my eye on the Berserker armor guts for SH Figure Arts for a long time, and also the SH Monster Art stuff. Man, I would love to get my hands on like maybe Space Godzilla or Millennium Godzilla from them. Or I think I see the Final Wars one in Barnes & Noble sometime. But yeah, like something like that, a very high quality figurine. Like something on par with like that you'd put on your shelf instead of a wall of Funko Pops, because people like quality. I like quality at least. Now, before I let you go, let's look back at this challenge, this experiment I've done over the past 2 months. I looked at some of the most famous, or perhaps most infamous entries into mascot horror with a beginner's mindset, a completely open mind. And you know what? I'm happy with the results. I found games I genuinely liked, and I can better understand why people like these games so much and can respect a lot of the devs that are making the indie scene happen in their truest form. I can see the creators learn and grow as they make their games, and that's been nice for me. While I love my indie immersive sims and immersive sims in general, it's not exactly a secret that many of them are essentially forever early access games, or if they haven't even gotten that far, they're, hey, just check out my demo, bro, it's gonna be so cool. And there's a reason I've had to make a rule where under most circumstances, demos do not get videos. Don't worry though, we are going right back to the ImSim soon. But for now, I can say that after taking off the blinders of preconception, while there are some high profile bombs in it, mascot horror is indeed a legitimate niche in spooky games that deserves a spot at the table and even has some great installments. I'm sure many of you have already made many suggestions to me in the comments of the previous videos, which sorry if this is how you're finding out, but I make all these videos in advance because this is how I take a yearly vacation. YouTube doesn't exactly let you accrue PTO. Once I'm back and refreshed in a couple weeks from your time, I'm gonna break out all those Transformers games I was able to get my hands on so we can get hyped. And later on, we're gonna finally get to that Fallout New Vegas, California compliance challenge, so get hyped for that. There's so much cool stuff I want to do so soon, and it's a great time to allow myself to broaden my horizons and get wild with videos. Now let's sign off. Remember that no matter what you do, what you create, be it painting, sculpting, or making videos of your own, what you do should never be called content. It is your art. Content is a word that has been twisted into meaning a means of grinding up all your skills, your aspirations, and your passions into a gray sludge that is meant for nothing more than the mindless consumption by uncaring masses so that a line can go up for somebody else's benefit. Your art is better than that. Your art is a reflection of you by the very nature of its creation, and in no way do you deserve to have your soul ground up into content. So get out there and fight for yourself by fighting for your art. Stay saucy, everyone. Where could the Chonkulus be? How'd you get up there? Wow, it's echoey. Because none of our stuff is here yet. Sir, how do you respond to the allegations that you were too scared to come out of your long haul carrier until I held a cheeseburger in front of the entrance? And then, when that didn't work, mommy had to reach in, grab you, and pull you out. And you were scared at first, but now you are lord of the cabinets. Look at you. I guess you like hopped up like from the counter to the refrigerator here. It is, I'm gonna put stuff on there. Probably like extra spices and stuff. Don't get used to this. Do not. Can I even pet you from my... I can't even pet you. It's too high even for me. Look at you, lording over us in your tall sitting spot. I can't bother you or do anything. I just have to sit here. Oh yeah, I never actually ranked all these games and videos like I said in the first couple videos. I guess we'll do a tier list like next week or something. See you there.